Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to Victim to Victory, Tragedy to Triumph. Today we have with us Sean Grevy from 43 Oak. Sean, I want to ask you a couple questions about your background to start us off. Now, I know you grew up in a challenging neighborhood growing up. Could you describe that a little bit for our audience today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I grew up in what's called Uptown Philadelphia, it's North Philly. You know, it was a pretty rough neighborhood, but I mean there were rougher neighborhoods, but ours was pretty tough. You know, I grew up definitely the minority in my neighborhood. I believe we were 95% African American, and the rest was Korean. So I think by the time I was 12, we were the last white family on the street. So that was interesting for me. But, you know, I felt a lot of love from the people I grew up with, so I won't sit here and say that, you know, I was treated poorly by the people I lived around. Maybe outside of my block, you know, where I didn't know guys. I'd get asked if I was lost and stuff like that. But, you know, I grew up there, and that was my hood, and, you know, I'm proud to be from there. So, you know, it's Philly.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You talk about it. Your block. Yeah. If people aren't from an inner city, they don't really understand what that means, like what it's like to grow up on a certain block.
Yep.
Can you describe that a little bit, what the environment's like in a city?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know, like today, if things are, you know, how it is for kids. I know when I go back to the neighborhood, it's a little different, but like when we were kids, man, and this is not a fabrication. I mean, we literally, you know, we would cut the bottoms out of milk crates and nail them to the street post, and that's how we played basketball. You know, we played street football. I was teaching my boys how to play street hockey, but you know, hockey was not a big sport where I was at. So you know, they like to play outside, but other than that, there was no hockey players. So street football, street basketball, and it was just like, you know, being a kid, man. We were outside every day. Yeah, we saw crazy stuff. I mean, one time we were playing. Our block was a U, 66th Avenue. And then it actually was two streets into one because it was a U. So I lived on the U. So I lived on two streets at once. But you know, one time we were playing football on the street, and a guy comes flying down the block. He had just stolen a car. He almost hit all of us. Two seconds later, you got 3 cop cars coming down. You know, but that was our neighborhood, and you know, I was proud to be from there, though. I mean, you know, nothing really bad ever truly came out of it, other than just good learning lessons.
So I know you grew up in a little bit of a challenging environment. You're from an Irish background, and a lot of drinking goes on with the Irish. It's
Yeah.
You know, I've been to Ireland. You know, I've
Yeah.
hung out with a lot of Irish people, and
Yeah.
I can't keep up the way they could drink their Jameson. So tell us about the alcoholism and how that affected you growing up.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's no secret to the people who know me. My mother and father are both 36 years sober. They got clean right before I was born. They were actually in the same rehab together. That's how they met. So, you know, I was fortunate enough to have that side of the coin with them. Yeah, of course, there were what they call the isms, you know, like when you're in recovery, you still do certain. But my parents were good to me. And, you know, it shed a lot of light because I had a lot of family members who were not in recovery. I always said in my family, you were either recovered or you weren't. There was really nothing in between. I had a lot of cousins that started drinking at the age of 8, 9 years old, and it didn't end well for some of them. You know, uncles that would just get completely obliterated and make fools of themselves. You know, I was Italian by proxy. My family, typical, you know, city, Northeast family, half Irish, half Italian. I just happened to be all Irish, but we married a lot of Italians. That's the way it goes, right? But the Italians used to always make a joke. My Italian side of the family was from Staten Island, so they would always come down and we would have our parties together. And they said that they loved coming to Philly because they knew that they'd be home by 9 o'clock every time they did a party in Philadelphia, because by the time that party started, within a few hours, it was a lock that somebody on the Irish side of the family was going to be fist fighting outside after a few Yinglings, you know, and the party was over. And the difference between the Irish and the Italian, you know, the Italians, they like to hug it out, and it's all good, and they laugh and joke, and there's no grudges. The Irish, you know, we don't talk for months, you know, they'll hold that grudge, you know. But just growing up and seeing that, you know, really made me realize that's not what I want for my life. Unfortunately, I had a cousin who, unfortunately, threw away a professional baseball career on steroids and some other things, and you know, he was a big drinker, and he got clean and ended up doing 4 tours in Iraq during 9/11. Now he's a battalion chief in Philadelphia in the fire department. Turned his whole life around. But when I was a kid, I didn't see that. I just saw him throw his life away.
Right.
And I was like on the verge of being a serious hockey player, right? My career was just starting. And I said, okay, I can't be like that. I can't throw this away. And so I just stayed away from it because of that.
Now, I've known you for several years now, and you don't drink at all, right?
No, I never have.
And that's based on
Yeah.
what you saw growing up.
Yeah, I just decided at a young age, and you know, my parents never told me that I couldn't. That was the odd thing, right? You think two recovered parents, they'd be like, "Don't drink," you know. It's kind of the opposite. They were like, "Look, if you want to drink, you know, just do what you got to do because kids are going to do what they're going to do. Just be honest with us about it and try to drink in moderation. And if you have a problem with it, don't be hesitant to reach out." And I just decided, why even go down that road? And yeah, I felt like I had enough personality to get along in a crowded room without a drink, so it never really affected me, Right. And it was kind of funny, in my neighborhood, a lot of my boys, they loved that I didn't drink, So we would be out, like sometimes people take it personally, I don't know why, but they take it personally that I don't drink, at parties and stuff when I was younger. And my boys ended up getting fights with guys just because they were like clowning me for not drinking. That's how my neighborhood guys were. They would literally stand up for me and be like, he's a hockey player, he's not drinking, he's going places in life, which is kind of cool. So
it is. So you just mentioned hockey. How does an inner city kid growing up in an African American neighborhood, being Irish, Philly,
yeah,
not a lot of ice time in the middle of Philly.
No.
So how did you get involved in hockey?
My father was a goalie. My stepfather was a hockey player as well. And, my dad was just, diehard Flyer fan. He wanted me to be a hockey player. They got me on the ice. My parents got me on the ice when I was 3 years old. Actually, 2. I started skating when I was 2, my first pair of skates. But my first team that I played on, I was 4.5. Which is my daughter's age now, and she's playing, which is cool. But yeah, they had me on it. I don't even remember learning the sport, and it just became a part of my identity. It's just who I was growing up. And yeah, there was not a lot of ice time. There was actually only a couple rinks in the entire city, and one was in Northeast Philly, which was actually kind of far from where we lived. And but my parents did everything they could to make sure that I stayed on the ice if that's where I wanted to be. And fortunately for me, that kept me out of the neighborhood on the weekends. And that was when, that's when the trouble happens. Yes. So I was never around. I was in Massachusetts and here and there. But it was hard. I watched my parents work 3-4 jobs, and do whatever they could to keep me on the ice. I think they knew how important it was that I stayed, in hockey.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about hockey. Everybody knows the NHL. Mm-hmm. And most people know, if you play football, you play Pop Warner, you play high school, you play in college, and you eventually, if you're one of that, 1/1000th percentile, you might get a shot to go pro. So tell me, what's the course that you take as a hockey player to get eventually to the NHL? What are all those steps?
It's a long road, man. I think it's the longest road in sports. And I think it's more political than any other road as well. It's really hard to make it in the sport of hockey if you don't have an uncle that played pro or, is connected somehow or just financially very wealthy and can fund things. And that's reality. And, as a hockey player, you kind of have to, if you're not those things, you gotta find a way to stand out. For me, that was fighting. That was being a nut on the ice, hitting guys that were 3 times my size just to make a statement, being a pinball out there and not being afraid of anybody. And if coach asked me to do something, I would do it because I wanted to play hockey. And didn't have to be like that. I look back and kind of wish that wasn't my game because I thought I was a pretty good hockey player. And sometimes it kills me that I spent so much of my time on the ice, being angry. No. And there was a lot of anger with that because I was angry that I was even playing that kind of game. I didn't want to play that game. I wanted to play on the first line. But, a lot of kids aren't given that opportunity. And, in hockey, you got to climb the ladder. I mean, if you're not on the radar by 13, 14 years old, you can pretty much forget it. And by the time you're 18, if you're not playing what's called juniors, which is what hockey players play before college, you're really out of it. So you're 18, you play 3 years of juniors, generally speaking.
Right.
You go up to Mass, you go up to Canada, you go up to Minnesota, wherever. You could, even now here, Jersey, Philly, New York, they have some pretty good junior clubs. But that's where you really learn how to play that, like real fighting, real hockey, you learn to be tough at a young age. It really grooms you for the next step, which it would be NCAA hockey. Then you do 4 years of college. So now you're talking about 24, 25 years old before you're even looking at a shot at pro. And then you come out of NCAA, and it is not a lock to be an American hockey player coming out of NCAA to play in the NHL. I mean, the odds have to be just ridiculously low. So the road is hard. It's not impossible. It can be done. I have a lot of friends that play in the NHL that are from America. One of my buddies just got called up to the Ducks a week ago. He's played 3 games. He's already got 3 points. But that's the thing. So he got called up. He got his chance. He struck. You know, if he came out in those 3 games, didn't make noise, he's back down to the American Hockey League, right, and he might stay there the rest of his career. Sure. That's it. You get one shot.
Well, take me a little bit through your career.
Yeah, well, I did that. You know, I did that road of, you know, I played, you know, AAA Tier 1 hockey, which is a requirement if you want to play at the next levels. And, you know, and then I went and played some junior hockey out in Massachusetts. And then, you know, I was working. I mean, I started working when I was 16 years old. So throughout all that, I just was like starting to make real money. I'm like, you know, what do? I'm playing with the idea of playing some minor league hockey, you know, playing some minor league stuff, which I ended up doing later, which is fun, you know, playing in these pro leagues out here. Like, it's a good time, and I get to be with a lot of the guys that are actually in the NHL and do that kind of stuff. And I still hang. You know, I'm 35 years old. I still hang. I put the points on the board. But, and you've seen it. You've been to some of the games. But, you know, I had a lot of concussions, and unfortunately, you know, by the time I was 19, I was looking at, you know, I was already at my 9th concussion, and that was from playing that style of hockey that I grew up playing, and I had a shot at playing for one of the Flyers minor league pro teams, and my friend was the coach. He goes, you know, I'll put you on the team. You're good enough. He's like, but you got a job opportunity in New York right now that I think will probably set you up for the rest of your life. This is going to last a couple years, if that, and you're probably going to be scrambled eggs by the end of it. So really, what do you want to do? And he was a professional fighter. He fought for 10 years in the NHL. I mean, he's got probably more fights than most guys. He fought Ty Domi, all those guys. And he's like, man, I'm dealing with the demons up here. You know, you don't want that, and I don't want to see that for you. So, you know, I decided to really start my career at that point, you know, in business. And, you know, and then hockey came back into my life after that.
All right, let's take that transition then.
Yeah.
19 years old, fighter on the ice, scrappy. You always reminded me of like a Bobby Clark type of player.
Yeah, definitely
you
was.
Know, and he was. If people that don't know, Bobby Clark was a guy. He had no teeth. He just had the fangs coming down. Fought all the time. Wasn't a big guy, but he was a fire plug, and he got all the Flyers back in the Broadway days, the Broadway Bullies days. He was the spark plug and the captain of that team, and that's kind of what I saw you as. That type of player, not a really big guy, but weren't afraid to throw hands and scrap, and get your team going when you needed to.
Yeah.
So that only lasts so long when you're about 160 pounds, right?
Pretty close, yep.
Yeah. So
soaking wet.
Yeah. So when you go from 19 years of age, you're really concentrating on hockey. What you said you had a great career opportunity. What did you do?
So I had been working in advertising since I was 16 years old already, and I kind of built, you know, a little bit of experience under my belt. You know, I was coming up in my 4th year, and I got a job opportunity in New York City to do celebrity brand endorsements for Elvis Duran in the Morning on Z100. Right. And at the time, I'm like, I'm not a New York guy, man. Like, you know, I'm a Philly guy. You know, it's that Philly mentality. And I was really struggling with the idea of leaving and really walking away from hockey. And a lot of things just changed, right? And I learned later in life the only constant thing in life is change, right? But back then, change was scary as hell. As a 19-year-old kid, you know, I'm living in the projects at the time, trying to fund my life and eating ramen noodles every night, you know. And it was a great job opportunity. It didn't pay a lot. but it was the job, right? It was the idea of like where you were working. It's like playing for the Yankees, but you're getting paid less, but you're playing for the Yankees.
Right.
You know, it was a resume builder. And it was a great experience to work for a top corporate company, which was iHeartMedia. And so, you know, I was struggling with it. The night that I was supposed to leave for New York, I was out till 2, 3 in the morning driving, trying to clear my head and get right. I just couldn't get with the idea of leaving. And I called my mother, and at the time I was working for her company, and I knew that if I left, I was doing so well for her company that it would really hurt them, maybe even end their business. And she knew that. And I called her, and she said, you know what, you got to go. You got to go. You got to go. You got to go to New York. You're my son. I love you. I can't be selfish. I need you to go try this. I called my father. He said, listen, you're a neighborhood kid. You're scared to leave the neighborhood. Stoop kid's afraid to leave his stoop, you know, but you got to go, you know. And he said, listen, the thing about Philly is you got to put it in your rear view, you know, because the thing about Philly is it's going to be here waiting for you if you fail. Everybody's going to be right here. You're going to come back a year or two from now. You're going to see nobody changed.
Right.
You got an opportunity to change. This is your chance. Go change. And I went. That was it. I went, moved to New York. First 6 months were hell. And then I became a New York guy. I've lived in New York for 14 years in Manhattan. I mean, I love New York City. It's my second home now. Couldn't imagine not being.
So how long were you with iHeartRadio?
A couple years. I bounced around. You know, to be honest, I was such an island. This is kind of why I started my business. I just really wasn't meant to work for other people, but I knew I was getting good experience and being around the right people. You know, I was working with major national brands and learning how to put together certain things that I wouldn't have known how to do on my own. And I was just making a lot of the right connections too. And I ended up working for 9 different radio stations over the course of like, I don't know, 4 years, something like that. Ended with 95.5 PLJ, which is a pretty iconic New York radio station. Right. But I worked for Q1043, 106.7 Light FM, and I made some lifelong friends. I mean, lifelong.
And what were you doing? Were you selling radio space?
Yeah. It was, you know, for me, it was a lot of endorsement-focused stuff. I mean, you know, of course, we did some spots and dots, and that's kind of what they wanted us to push because that's where the money was at. But I knew that, you know, endorsements was what was going to succeed for clients, and that's really what I wanted. Like, I didn't want to get that phone call like, hey, this isn't working, you know, and that happens a lot in radio, especially back then.
So just for anybody that's listening right now, and you started at the bottom,
yeah,
and you paid the dues for 4 years.
Yeah.
Now, 4 long years. You moved to where you had to move.
Yeah.
I'm sure you weren't living large. You're eating ramen noodles. You're living in a
I lived in
rough
somebody's attic with the true story, no heat, no air conditioning. I did a year there in the middle of the summer and the winter. Slept with a space heater next to my head when it was 0 degrees outside. I was in Staten Island, so I would have to wake up. I would beat my boss into the office because he told us that when I first started, that was one of his things, and nobody listened to him, you know, but I did. He ended up becoming a really close friend after that. But, you know, he said, you know, be here before me, leave after me. Well, he got into the office at 7 a.m. So I knew I'd have to leave Staten Island in the morning by like 5:30 because I had to drive to the ferry, or drive to the train, take the train to the ferry to the city, walk 20 blocks up from Financial District to Tribeca, which is where our office was. And that was my commute in every day. And then leaving, he wouldn't leave till 7:30 at night. So I didn't get home till 9 o'clock at night.
Now, how long did you do that?
I did that for 2 years.
Yeah, and that's, again, when people look at us now, they always say, oh, you're so successful. They don't see that for 2 years, you would get up in the morning, before dawn.
Yeah.
It's 0 degrees out.
Yeah.
It's snowing out. There's ice on the ground,
Horrible.
and you're going through
I'll never
this.
forget it.
You're walking to work, 20 blocks,
Yep.
in the freezing cold. And if
Yeah.
anybody doesn't know, walking through New York, it may not be too windy on one block, but then you hit the next block, it's like getting hit with a tornado. and at 0 degrees or 10 degrees, 20 degrees, it's freezing.
Yep.
Now, it's so damn cold that, you know, they canceled the inauguration outside when it's 20 degrees out because it's too cold.
Imagine walking by the ferry with that wind hitting your face from the, you know, oh my God, man.
And that's 2 years.
Yeah.
And now, you know, you have the very young generation, they want things handed to them. They don't understand.
They do. Yeah.
Get into work
They do.
before the boss, walk 20 blocks in the cold after taking a train and a ferry for every day for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go. We're 4 years down the road.
Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
Well, I was still playing hockey in the midst of all that. I never stopped skating. And I had a tragic accident where I paralyzed my face. The right side of my face. They call it Bell's palsy or Ramsay Hunt. Justin Bieber just had it. Ramsay Hunt lasts a little longer. I'm pretty sure that's what I had, but it lasted for about a year. But it was trauma-induced. I got hit in the neck. So when I got hit,
hockey.
yeah, when I got hit in the neck, it pinched the nerve. So it's actually, the nerve is on the left side of your neck. I paralyzed the right side of my face. Couldn't talk, couldn't eat, couldn't drink. I'm still partially paralyzed. If I laughed too hard, you'd see it. Thank God I healed enough to look semi-normal otherwise. But yeah, that was game-changing. I was working for PLJ at the time in corporate, and I couldn't go on meetings. I couldn't do anything for them. And I felt the pressure, what, so what are you here for, And that didn't feel good.
Right.
And I won't say too much on that, but it definitely pushed me to say, you know what, this is the time. And most people would say, you're crazy. You started a business while your face was paralyzed. No, this was the time. This was it. And I started my company, that was it. I knew what I had to do. I talked to the right people, right? I made those connections. I knew a guy who owned an agency that was very successful. I asked him, I said, will you teach me the ropes? He said, listen, you got a good client base that you built. I'll tell you what, you work with me for a year, I'll make all the connections you need. I take 50% of everything you make. Done. Done.
So you spend a year there, increasing now your portfolio,
Yeah.
your book of business and clients. Then, did you finally start 43 Oak at that time?
I started 43 Oak a year later.
And now, explain where the name 43 Oak comes from.
43 was my hockey number, and Oak was Oak Lane, is where I grew up. And it was quick. I mean, I put that together in like 3 seconds. Yeah. What was funny is there was a very popular club in Manhattan at the time called One Oak. I did not think of that when I put the name together. So when nobody knew who I was back then, people were like, One Oak? Oh, you're with One Oak, the club? And I'm like, no, like, it's, just forget it.
Yeah. And so what did 43 Oak do? What were you doing once you opened up your own business?
So the idea was to safeguard clients, right? I realized in corporate that I was in a position where I was basically being forced to charge clients like yourself more money than you should be spending. And that was, that's what they told us. That was the direction. And if you didn't do it, slap on the wrist. Come on, in my office. Why did you charge $750 for that spot? That's a $2,000 commercial. Well, the flat rate is $750, I would say. So why are we charging $2,000? Because we can. I said, that's not okay with me. And this is how I built my client base, right? And I just decided that's it. I'm going to represent the client, not these guys. I don't want to work for these guys. I want to work for the client and go against these guys because I know what these guys are doing. Right. So now I just got to learn TV and billboards and all the other stuff, and then I'll be a full-service agency. Like, I can do this. I really believed in my head that I could do it, and I had all the goods, right? But I always talk about, like, fake it till you make it. I think there's 2 schools with that. Like, some people, I think, are, faking it because they're scam artists, and then they make it because they just are good at conning people, but they never really learn the craft. And then there's people who are faking it on some level, but they know what they're doing. They're just faking it till they get to the place where people can give them the opportunity to do it, and then they'll continue to learn and get better and better, and then they don't have to fake it anymore. And for me, it was more the second. I just wanted people to take a chance on me. I just needed somebody to say, hey, I'll give you a shot, And it didn't happen. The first 2 years, I had enough clients to, like, eat, and then not even that. And then I was trying to support my family at the same time. My mother was going through a hard time at that time, and we were just all pulling together, and things were hard. And I ended up, I lost my place that I was living in, and my cars went out for repossession, both of them. I had 2 cars at the time. I was making a lot of money when I worked in New York at the radio stations. I mean, I don't want to tell you, it was good. It was really good. When I look back, I'm like, Jesus, as a business owner, you're like, but I lost everything, and I was still partially paralyzed. And I decided that, I had a choice, right? I could try and get a job back in corporate, or I could live on the road and not tell anybody. And I took out a storage unit. I kept my suits in there. I took a $10 membership at Retro Fitness, and I shaved at Sunoco stations on the Jersey Turnpike. And I would sleep on the Jersey Turnpike every night, and I would look at all the billboards, and I knew one day that I was going to have some billboards on that road. I didn't know I'd end up having this many, right. And then one day, one day it all just, I did that for 9 months. I lived in my car on the run for the repo guy.
Yeah.
True story. I'm not ashamed to admit it, because I knew what I was doing. I just needed somebody to say, hey, I'll take a chance. And I had a great client that took a chance on me. That would be Eat Clean Bro. Yep. I think a lot of people in this area know who Eat Clean Bro is. And we formed an unbelievable relationship. I just got off the phone with him 2 seconds ago. We've been working together for 8 years. He's one of my best friends. And then I realized that's how it's going to be. Every client I work with, now that I'm running my business, they're going to be my best friends. That's who I want to work with. If I'm going to get up and fight every day against these media companies, well, no different than hockey, I'm only fighting for the guys I love. And if you touch my goalie, I'm going to knock you out because I love my goalie. It's the same thing with business. I didn't want to work in corporate for companies that didn't care what I was doing for them. I want to work with people who I know trust me and I trust them back, and we're fighting for the same thing together. And that's what I ended up being able to build with 43 Oak. That was the whole purpose,
How many years were you in your own business before you got your big break?
2.
2 years.
2 years again.
And after you basically went bankrupt.
I lost everything that I had just built.
And then for 9 months, you were living out of your car and changing in, bathrooms, up and down the turnpike, shaving, showering in the gym for $10 a month, what's your deal with Retro Fitness? No,
they had tanning beds too. My Irish side needed that.
So you go from there, you hit Eat Clean Bro. For those who don't know, Eat Clean Bro, they package meals and they count the macros and they're healthy meals, and they're clean for people on the go. Yep. So what did you do for Eat Clean Bro? And tell me a little bit about how the progression then of 43 Oak.
Yeah, that was it. We were off to the races at that point. I put together a big billboard campaign. He had already been doing a really great thing locally, in these areas down here, Point Pleasant and some stuff. But, I was able to put together something that was, with the help of some friends in the business, arguably the best billboard deal that ever existed in the state of New Jersey. And Jamie will tell you that. He did a podcast talking about how nobody will ever touch the rates that he had. Well, that's what my agency ended up doing, and that's what we still do for our clients. I know that our deals are better than everybody else's, and that's because of what I built. But, with him specifically, we threw these boards up on the turnpike, and it was like, forget about it. It was like, bam, in your face. And it was like, Eat Clean Bro, and everybody noticed it. And it was very quick where people were hearing about it. He was referring me business right off the gate. He was such a great guy. He is such a great guy. But people knew who it was. And even so, the next client that took a big chance on me, I'm also still working with for 7 years, which was Pondley Hockey, which are friends of yours. And when I was in the meeting, I remember mentioning Eat Clean Bro, and they said, oh, you're the agency that does Eat Clean Bro? And I'm like, wow, you guys are from Philly. You know those guys? They're like, how can you not, And we'll take a chance on you. And man, I just rolled the sleeves up for them, for Jamie, for whoever I was working with. And as time went on, more trust was built, and I did more things. And you know how it is. You spend enough time in a certain role in a certain business, you garner that veteran thing, right? You're no longer a rookie. Now you're in the game. Now you've been in the game for 5 years. Now you're in the game for 10 years. And it grows, and now you just have this supreme level of confidence. And as long as you stay sharp and hungry, you become unstoppable. You just can't lose your hunger.
Well, with 43 Oak, I know you do more than billboards. So what does your agency do? Yeah,
so we're really media buyers and planners. That's really at the heart of it. Any type of media, from streaming TV, broadcast television, podcasts, advertising on podcasts, radio, billboards, and now even full service in many ways, because we connect the dots for other things like. We've been able to connect Adapting Social with GGL, those kinds of relationships, Brian McDonald with a Rutgers deal, and bringing in the right people that I've met along the way, and I can vouch for because I know that they do a good job, and I can put my name on it, which to me means everything. Right. So for us, we just want to be that full body agency of record when we come in now. It's we got your back, You don't ever have to deal with salespeople ever again. You send them directly to me, and I take care of it. And my agency's so buttoned up at this point, you know, there's just protocol with all this, and I'm just grateful to see where we're at. But, you know, the main thing of what we do is when we buy media, we don't just buy the media. You know, we help strategically plan that media. You know, we look at where you want to be, your demographics, who you're trying to hit, what time of the year you're trying to hit. And we enter into a market that's very volatile at all times. The media market is extremely volatile. From last year, we dealt with the elections. I mean, holy. I mean, it was just like, forget about it. It was trying to buy media at that time, especially in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, battleground state #1. You couldn't get on the television. So you got to find ways to adjust. And that's where an agency comes in. You find other options, alternatives, and you try to strategize for the client and put together options for them to say, hey, I like this, hey, I don't. We're consultants, right? We deal with the salespeople. If you want to buy a billboard, I'm working with 5 or 6 different billboard companies to get you that billboard deal. And I'm putting them all against each other in a room. And I'm going to see who comes out on top. And then if you want it, we're going to put it together. And that's what we do. You know, we safeguard you, the client. And then we buy. When it's time to buy, you know, we have the relationships, we have the buying power at this point. You know, spending in the tens of millions a year, we did it. You know, we're there. So now we have that prestige as well. That when we go into a market to buy, there's a lot of respect there for us, and so we're able to leverage all of those clients that we have: the Eat Clean Bros, the Pond Lee Hockeys, the GGLs. So when a client joins with 43 Oak, you're getting all that. It's a big team. It's not just, you know, a $100,000 buy. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars. So that's kind of how we operate.
Well, so now that 43 Oak is very successful, now you don't have to worry about your car being repoed. You're driving a beautiful car, a beautiful house, great life, money in your pocket, and then you decide to give back to the community.
Yeah.
And you have 43 Oak giving back to the inner city through hockey.
Yeah.
And I know you've teamed up with the New York Islanders.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, how you're giving back to the community and what you're doing and your association with hockey and the Islanders.
Yeah, I knew like 10 years ago that I wanted to give back. I wanted to be that guy that, you know, didn't just write a check. I wanted to get in it. And how do I get in it? What do I get into? What do I love? What do you love, Sean? You love hockey. How can you help people in hockey? You can help guys like yourself that didn't have money playing the sport. And then let's take it a step further. I was coaching in Manhattan at the time, and I realized as I traveled to different hockey rinks, and I won't say the towns that we went to, but there was a lot of racism. I had trash thrown at me. I had people spit on me. Forget about me, I had my kids getting called the N-word, getting called animal names and noises, and it was disgusting. And I realized, okay, I know my mission. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to set out and try to change this sport, one player at a time. I'm not going to change the world overnight. Right. One player at a time. I'm going to change this sport. I'm going to create a safe place for these players so that if they need financial help, they got it. If they need guidance and mentorship, they got it. If they need connections to the AAA hockey coaches, because there's 200 kids trying out for a team of 20 players, they got it. I know the coaches. Why shouldn't our kids have that as well? And that's what the 43 Oak felt. But it was so loose, right, for over the years. And we were just kind of like doing it. And like, you know, I'm going through these ups and downs in my life. And during that time that I was homeless, I was actually putting probably 40 to 50K a year into the foundation to help the 5 or 6 kids. One kid could cost you 10K. Right. I had about 5 or 6 kids that I was helping, just loosely, you know. And as soon as the business started doing well, shortly after that, I got a phone call. I thought it was a prank call. It was the New York Islanders. I had been trying for years to get in touch with the NHL and this one and that one, players. And, you know, back then I didn't know all the NHL guys that I know now. I was trying so hard. And the the Islanders called, and it was like, hey, we want to talk to you about partnering. We were looking to do a 5-year partnership with UBS Wealth Management. It'd be $1 million grant. And we will be real partners of yours. We will feature you on the Jumbotron during the games, and we will do practices with alumni like Brian Trottier and Aaron Asham and all these legends that play. And they did it, and we did it. And we're in our 5th year now. I mean, we're down the road with this thing, but it's been incredible. We went from 6 players to over 200 families across the country that we're supporting in different ways. And we run monthly mentorship calls with UBS Wealth Management on financial literacy, contract negotiations for players. I mean, these are things that Who would ever think, right? And the Islanders run these alumni practices where professional NHL players get out and pass the puck around with these kids. Could you imagine? You know,
awesome.
Featuring the kids on the Jumbotron during the game. They bring the kid to the game, tell this story in between periods, and that kid's sitting there, and then they interview the kid on the big screen and say he's a part of 43 Oak Foundation. So, and then we have these practices, and we're doing all this great stuff. But anyway, you know, I realized that was my calling, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what the partnership became, and it allowed us to really, like, transform what I was doing individually into something much bigger, you know, and now we have a whole team of people.
So now you're taking inner city kids. They're playing for club teams, high school teams. Are they making it to?
No. Our program is very different than other, you know, programs that kind of do similar things. We're not teaching kids how to play hockey. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking kids from programs that are teaching them how to ice skate and learn, and the kids that are serious, that really want to be hockey players, we're taking those kids and we're helping fund their mission to get to Tier 1 hockey, right? So the majority of our players play Tier 1 or Tier 2, which is AA, AAA. That's about as high as it gets. We just had our first player sign an NHL contract this year. Another kid made Team USA for the 18U National Development Team.
So that's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you look back at the kids that I was coaching day one from Harlem, and I love them to death. I mean, some of them are still involved from a coaching standpoint. And then you think about the resources that we have now, and I wish we had them back then. But we have them now, and the proof is in the pudding. We're doing it.
So what advice do you have for anybody who wants to get into advertising and some life lessons? I'm always big, you know, I've coached everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've coached baseball, football, wrestling, not hockey. I can't skate. You know, and it's all about the life lessons. What do you want people to understand about your life and how you've gone from a tragic beginning and you've triumphed in your career and as a person?
You know, I've been thinking about this question a lot for the last couple of weeks, knowing that we were going to be doing this. And I haven't done a podcast in a very long time because I kind of wanted to take a step back from talking about things. And I think I wanted to just act again. I wanted to put action, you know, and do my job. And maybe earn a little more credit before I started talking about things. And I did that for a few more years. And I'm glad to be sitting here now and answering this question, because I think it's a really important question in today's world, where we sit on Instagram and we see people giving advice from all different walks of life. And some are, I think, you know, valid, like yourself, and others are not. And you have to kind of be careful even within that, because there's a lot of talking heads. And a lot of people that feel they have a voice now, and they're talking about things that are just not real. And I think my advice to anybody coming up now is just be genuine in what you do. Just move with authenticity. Don't allow yourself to fall victim to watching other people succeed. You got to follow your own journey. I mean, if mine is any kind of proof, I mean, I've literally been homeless, and I could be homeless again. Like, I understand that is the reality, high risk, high reward. But if you're willing to take the chances, you got to believe in it. And you know, the other thing is start young with that, because it's a lot harder to take. You know, I have a 4-year-old little girl. I don't know that I could take the chances that I took back then now. You know, that sweat equity that I put in, those, you know, early mornings in Staten Island and all that I don't think I could do that. I mean, even today, I'm going to leave here and I'm going to go home to my little girl, and you know, we're going to cook dinner at home, and that's my nights now. Back then, I was working till 11 o'clock at night. It's not that I don't hustle. I still work but I'm doing emails from home now. Now I'm in a different spot.
Wait a minute. So you were getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and working till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And that's what really the younger
no
generation has to understand, is that nothing is given to you.
No.
I mean, you and I come from the same world. I still get up at 5:30 every morning.
Absolutely.
You know that.
Absolutely.
And work until
as late as you need to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you're doing it in a different way.
Yes.
The hustle's different.
The hustle's different.
You're still grinding, but it's a different, you know, you're just in a different place, but you earned it.
Yep.
You earned it. And the other thing I will say, and I think this is, this is so important, because this is the number one thing that when I watch things online, I always wonder why people don't talk about this. Yes, it's wonderful that we come from nothing, right? And there's so many of these stories, right? I'm unique to a degree, but I'm not that unique. Right. You know, there's so many great stories out there. But to say that I'm self-made, I will never say that. I'll never say that I am self-made, because I'm not. There were people that helped me along the way. There were people that when I was in my car and showering at Retro Fitness, they never stopped calling me. They never stopped checking in on me. And those were the times, man, like that was it. Like I'll never forget sitting in my car, man, and just crying, dude. Punching my steering wheel because it was so hard. It was so hard. And I had those few people that I could call and check in, and they told me it was okay and to keep going. Keep going. You didn't come here to bunt. Hit the home run. And I did, and those people, those same people that when I started to make it, they still didn't forget about me. They still reached their hand down and pulled me up to the next floor. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, part of this life is about knowing the right people. Yes, that is how you get to places in this world. You got to make those relationships. You got to, and the only way to do that is to get out there and meet people. Put yourself in a place to meet people and be genuine and authentic. But the second part of it, they're going to take you there, but you got to do the work. You got to do those 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. nights every day, every day. And that is a lost art. You're right. There's a generation now that does not understand that. God, if I could give one piece of advice, you want to stand out, you want to be unique in today's world, that's all you got to do, because no one's doing it. And I know guys like you and me, we see that kind of hustle. I'm not letting that guy walk.
Hell no.
No, I'm going to groom him.
Because there's so few and far between now.
Forget about it.
You can't teach hunger.
Can't teach hunger. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Brother, pleasure.
Hey,
Thank
man.
you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.